So, we're now in the week of Christmas, and I've been looking through our collection of holiday stories to find one for today. Right now, where I live, in the middle of California, it's pouring rain, and the wind is angling in pretty hard, at least pretty hard for us around here. For California, this is about as close as we ever get to winter weather. In terms of our podcast, though, I've been doing two things this week. I've been finalizing up the script for our new episode that, like always, we'll post this coming Sunday, and I've been looking for another holiday story in our fairly large set of episodes from December's past. The one I'm picking for today is one of my two favorite holiday episodes. Let me set it up like this. Right now in 2025, out at the Florida resort, teams have dressed Living with the Land with endless ropes and screens of holiday lights. This practice started a few years ago, and now all of the greenhouses, after dark at least, are aglow with holiday magic, lights that have increased year after year until now. Some of these displays have now been created by Disney designers in Florida, but a lot of them are store-bought. And this ride, at least for the month of December, now looks like another Disney holiday favorite long gone, called the Osborne Spectacle of Dancing Lights, which used to blaze up each December over at the studios. This is actually one of my favorite stories as it relates to the parks, the story of how a neighborhood display eventually made its way from Arkansas to Disney World. Here's hoping you enjoy it. And if you're over at Disney World this month, make sure to check out Living with the Land after 6 p.m., as the flavors of this old display have been absorbed in some small way into this attraction. Here we go. The hero of this story is Jennings Osborne, unless of course you were one of his neighbors in the early 1990s who sued him for turning his neighborhood into something that, according to court filings, resembled a theme park. In that case, he might be the villain, but for most of us, he'll be the hero of this story. He started from humble beginnings. He was born during the Second World War in a small town in Arkansas. He grew up watching the weekly Disney show I Love Lucy and Kit Carson. He had a typical childhood in the 1950s. In college, he studied business and biology at the University of Arkansas. For a while after graduation, he worked at hospitals, but then, in 1968, he and his wife, Mitzi, started a small business, the Arkansas Research Medical Testing Center, which coordinated pharmaceutical tests with volunteers for drug-seeking FDA approval. It did well, very well. By the early 1980s, he was a millionaire who lived in a 22,000 square foot house in an exclusive section of Little Rock. Somewhat stunned by his good luck, he freely spent his money on others, particularly on those in Arkansas, as he loved his home state. He funded the Miss Arkansas pageant, posted rewards for missing children, built computer labs for local high schools, and built billboards on which he encouraged passerbys to do, quote, random acts of kindness. Once, while in Hot Springs, Arkansas, where he also owned a vacation home, he was in a donut shop when noisy out-of-towners came in and argued about which donuts they should buy. Quote, they just barged in, he said, and took over the place. Their argument soon involved the cashier. From Osborne's perspective, it appeared a type of retail harassment. So while the tourists continued to argue, he bought every last donut in the shop and gave them out to people in town, but gave none to the out-of-state tourists who couldn't check their temper. Most of all, though, Jennings Osborne loved Christmas. Today on the podcast, the unusual story of one of the best-loved holiday traditions ever to be staged at Walt Disney World, a tradition for which even now, years after it ended, fans still come to the resort wearing pins, shirts, and hats emblazoned with the name of that celebration, the Osborne Family Spectacle of Dancing Lights. In 1986, Jenny Osborne's 6-year-old daughter wanted holiday lights to decorate their house. Her name was Allison, but she went by the nickname Breezy. "Breezy asked me to put up some Christmas lights," Osborne said. "So we, I think, outlined the wall on the house maybe, and I don't know if the house was involved the first year." He purchased 1,000 red lights as a holiday gift to Breezy and strung them across the outside of his house in Little Rock, Arkansas to create a festive display. By then, he was living in an upscale neighborhood, a quiet, exclusive community that also faced out on a highway where passers-by could easily see his small display. In looking at the lights once arranged in his yard, he said to himself, "You know, this is sort of a neat thing I can do." The display quickly became an obsession, one that he added to each year. The early displays expanded out the cranberry-toned bulbs with blankets of red, touched with accents of gold and green. "We were after something that would create a memory," he said. "You were in a car for 30 or an hour and 30 minutes trying to, there you have family time. Good memories, hopefully." One October, as stores set out their Christmas displays, one of Osborne's employees found that he had a new job for the week. He was to go to all of the Walmarts in and around Little Rock and buy as many strings of lights as he could find. In all, Osborne was trying to create an electronic Christmas card on his 2 acres, a project so large that by the early 1990s, he employed an engineer full-time whose sole job it was to arrange, set up, manage, and break down the display each year. In 1990, when Osborne turned on the lights, he blew a transformer, darkening part of his neighborhood and angering a few neighbors. In response, the electric company gave him his own transformer, which essentially ensured that any unusual draw and subsequent damage would only affect Osborne's house. In 1992, Osborne put up 1.6 million lights, which attracted thousands and thousands and thousands of people to his neighborhood, where 36 PA speakers played holiday music to set the mood. Each night, he turned on the lights at sunset and left them on until midnight, though some days, if the mood hit him, he left them on later for stragglers out on the road. As he lived on a street without continuous sidewalks and with no nearby parking, most of the visitors saw the display while passing in their cars. But still, each night, hundreds managed to walk up to his display in person. Among the various light dioramas, there was Santa, a nativity scene, Christmas trees, angels, lots of angels, and even a touch of Disney here and there. "I had a Mickey on a train," Osborne said, "and he was waving and smoke was coming out and it was very simple mechanical stuff." Despite having one of the largest, if not the largest, display of residential holiday lights in the country, Osborne wanted more. He would later admit, "I can't do anything in moderation." In 1993, Osborne bought the houses with their massive lawns on either side of his residence to create a continuous 6-acre display of lights, essentially tripling his present space. He now needed multiple engineers and a team of workers to dress the 3 houses with over 3 million lights that included 6 enormous poles to hold aerial displays and a massive globe with illuminated continents atop Osborne's white brick house. The globe turned in a circle, with the continents outlined in lights. In North America, only one state was outlined with a bright line of red light to indicate its prominence. That state, of course, was Arkansas. The globe also included the image of a dove as a wish for peace around the world. The elevated angel carousel, the globe, and canopies of lights now required a long-reach crane to install. With the extra houses, the presentation included raised blankets of lights arranged like an illuminated tent across one lawn. Another area featured a flock of angels suspended in air with their wings flapping, presumably to keep them in flight. The displays were arranged by color and theme. One yard held the original cranberry lights, another was focused on angels, and other areas held giant trees, Santa, reindeer, and so on. By then, Some lights were controlled by a computer, which for 1993 was unique technology for a home display. Police were now stationed along the highway to make sure traffic moved at a reasonable pace. That year, on its first night, at least 3 news crews circled in helicopters to gather video footage. "It just created a terrific jam in front of our house," Osborne said, "and everybody would drive slow. You know, they'd been in line for hours, so everybody wanted the 30 seconds. So traffic moved slow. But it was a big deal for us. We enjoyed doing it, and it opened a million doors for me." Because of the light display, he met 3 presidents: Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, and later George W. Bush. Jimmy Carter even asked him for a couple of those angels made of lights to decorate his own yard. That same year, 1993, 6 of Osborne's neighbors filed a lawsuit in Pulaski County Court arguing that the display had brought too many onlookers into their quiet neighborhood and was now, by definition, a nuisance. Together, the people behind this complaint were known locally as the anti-lights neighbors. For them, there were a number of breaking points. There was the issue with the transformer. Tom Pfizer, one of the 6, said that for him, it was when an Assemblies of God church bus pulled onto his driveway and started to unload all of its passengers. Then the group turned angry when he asked them to leave his property. But the big issue was the expansion, when Osborne bought the additional 2 houses simply to enlarge his display. One of the neighbors told the press, "It's garish. We're talking a lot of money, no taste." Another neighbor described it, and not in a flattering way, as a Yuletide Disneyland. At times, these neighbors were direct in their criticism. "I received enough letters," Osborne said, "saying that I'm the king of white trash." Around town, the anti-lights neighbors were called Scrooges and Grinches, who hoped to dim one of the most popular holiday events in town. "I just felt compelled to go a little public after those neighbors had nothing to do but harass me," Osborne said. He placed a pre-printed form of support in the local paper asking readers to clip it, fill it out, and send it to City Hall if they wanted the lights to continue. City workers stopped opening the envelopes after counting over 11,000 replies. But the suit didn't focus on personal taste or local popularity so much as the event being both a nuisance and a public safety hazard. Gary Coram, the attorney for the anti-lights neighbors, said, "It involved construction and operation of an enormous and spectacular Christmas light display in a residential area of such size and extravagance that it has become a tourist attraction." Their suit claimed that with traffic, a simple trip to the local grocery store could take 2 hours, 1 hour each way. Then there was this question: what if emergency vehicles needed to use the street? "We were essentially prisoners in our own homes," one of the plaintiffs, Arita Power, said. "If you forgot a stick of butter for a recipe, you were gone for over an hour." Osborne's attorney claimed that neighbors, as houses have generally large yards, had not been harmed except for traffic, which had increased over the holidays even without the lights. The first issue, Osborne's attorney said, is whether the light display is a nuisance, public or private. If the display is deemed a nuisance, the question becomes, can the nuisance laws override or supersede the First Amendment? At times, legal arguments took on notes of religious values, as the attorney for the Osbornes wanted to claim that, as the light display included a nativity scene and other biblical elements, it could be classified as a type of protected religious expression. The case received attention in newspapers across the country, so much so that the local trial was held in a borrowed federal courtroom to provide extra space for the press. At trial, neighbors testified that spectators routinely walked through their yards to see the lights, leaving trash and damaging plants. One person, from whom Osborne had bought an extra house, showed video of cars bumper to bumper. But in Osborne's defense, his attorney was able to show that houses increased in value rather than lost value during the years of the light display, and that litter along this road was a problem all year round, not just in December. In the end, a local court issued an injunction limiting the Osborne display to 15 days and ordering that the lights only be illuminated from 7 to 10:30 p.m., with the overall direction that the display be reduced. Osborne was also required to have 4 security guards on property at his own expense to manage crowds whenever the lights were lit. "It just makes me so sad," Osborne said, "that a few people could ruin something that so many enjoy." Osborne attempted to appeal the ruling, but the following year, by the time the appeal could be heard, he had already dressed at least 2 of his 3 houses for his 1994 display, which included a 70-foot angel. Sensing perhaps that the legal trade winds might be moving against him, in addition to the reduced display on his own property, Osborne began to diversify. He agreed to stage a smaller display of lights at the public space of Arlington Park in Hot Springs, Arkansas, not far from where he owned a vacation home, about an hour southwest of his Little Rock residence. On December 5th, Osborne and his lawyer presented their appeal to the Arkansas Supreme Court, using an argument that the lights expressing the joy in the holidays were a type of protected speech under the First Amendment. But a justice there refused to halt the injunction on an emergency basis and ordered, quote, the Osbornes to trim the multi-million bulb light show so it was no longer a public nuisance. 1 week later, the Hot Springs display near Osborne's vacation home was turned on for the first time on Tuesday, December 13th. 30 trees, animated with computer-controlled lights, blossomed up to the wonder of hundreds of onlookers. As the lights twinkled across the lawn, Osborne and his family handed out free candy canes to spectators enjoying the show. Still, there was the issue of the house in Little Rock. Even if the courts weren't behind him, Osborne knew he carried public support. A local TV channel surveyed its viewers to find that 89% of them were in favor of the light show continuing. When crowds arrived at his house on Saturday, December 17th to see the display, Osborne couldn't help himself. He lit a portion of the lights, attempting to follow the court orders to tone it down, though reports differ as to how much toning was actually done. The attorney for the neighbors, Gary Coram, claimed that the Osbornes lit 2/3 of his massive display. Osborne's attorney later claimed that only 5% of the lights out there were illuminated. 95% of the lights were off. Osborne would later explain that the family only turned on 174,000 of their lights, down from the usual 3 million or so. A local paper would later state that only 2 of the 3 houses owned by Osborne had their lights on, one on either side of his residence to better disperse crowds. On December 20th, the court asked Osborne why he shouldn't be held in contempt for not following the court's orders, as the display was still a spectacle and therefore a nuisance. His lawyer said the court's instructions were vague as to how much of the light display needed to be turned off. The court then clarified that though this issue began as a civil proceeding, it now contained a criminal element, as Osborne had refused to follow the court's directions. In response, Gary Coram asked the court that Osborne be put in jail until he discontinues and dismantles the massive display he has built and operated in defiance of this court's orders. The following day, Osborne's lawyer said that Osborne has accepted his advice that the lights be kept off until the contempt issue is resolved and parameters are set for the display. The court date was set in mid-March to allow attorneys time to prepare their arguments and gather evidence. In the end, Osborne was fined $1,500 and was forced to pay $7,000 for his neighbor's legal fees. With his own legal fees added in, he later said about this part of the court dispute, it was a quick $10,000. More seriously, he was given a 10-day suspended sentence in jail for contempt, with the suggestion that if he lit up his house again, the penalty would be more severe. Following the fine and suspended sentence, he began to shutter his display. When we got the word that, we had to shut our lights down, that was very devastating, because, I was just doing it to make people happy, and my daughter happy. By this time, Osborne was receiving calls from all over the country to create outdoor displays in other cities. And I'd receive calls to decorate the Empire State Building, a mountain in Montana, every crazy thing you could think of, Osborne said. The first call from Disney went to Osborne's attorney. They both ignored it as they suspected it was a minor complaint about Osborne using Mickey Mouse as part of his 6-acre display. But then the people from Disney became more insistent. This guy from Disney, Osborne said, that I didn't know. He said he was from Orlando, had this residential street that he wanted decorated, and would I be interested? Though Osborne had been to Disney World many times and liked it, he had no idea what this residential street was. And I always said, put it in writing and send it to me, and I'll certainly entertain it. Even then, Osborne wasn't convinced the offer was legitimate, but the letter arrived on official Disney stationery. Not long after this, John Phelan, a show director for Disney, traveled to Arkansas with an offer. Now that the courts had ordered the light show taken down, would he be interested in displaying them at Disney World on the residential street, which he explained was part of the backlot at the Disney MGM studios? Jennings Osborne accepted the offer and agreed to ship his light displays, keeping only a single angel for his yard, which he planned to illuminate to remind people of all the wonders that once existed there. In 1995, 3 million lights, more or less, were strung up down Residential Street, a section of the backlot that included reproductions of homes where the Golden Girls and other TV families once lived. Original displays from Arkansas were included in the installation: the massive globe that rotated, a 70-foot tree constructed of lights, a presentation of Santa in his sleigh high above, with Santa and the reindeer lit from within, and a Star of David. In ads, Disney touted, quote, "See the Christmas display that was too big for Little Rock." The show, a novelty with no firm plans for a second year, was a massive hit, drawing thousands and thousands to the studio's park. Shortly after it opened, Disney eyed ways to expand it with some input from Osborne. "I got a call yesterday from Michael Eisner," Osborne said in December of 1995. "We got a lot of plans for next year. I've got a lot of room there and a lot of nice neighbors. I haven't overwhelmed anybody in Orlando." For its second year, Disney added 1 million lights and expanded the display area so that they blanketed Residential Street and New York Street. The new displays featured additional angels hung in the air, giving the streets a total of 178 winged angels, as well as lights that changed color. The resort was also experimenting with more hidden Mickeys inside of displays as a type of scavenger hunt for guests. In the years that followed, Jennings Osborne contributed ideas for the Disney display. But back in Arkansas, while a single angel remained on his own lawn, he worked to create holiday spectacles in areas of Little Rock that were more receptive to his ideas. In 1997, he helped arrange light displays in 10 communities, albeit these displays were far smaller than the one he used to stage at his own house. In 1998, he helped to create displays in 30 communities, including 2 100-foot-tall trees at the River Market in downtown Little Rock and 1 million lights draped across the state capitol building. "I'd love to light up the whole state," he said. By then, he was known to the press as the King of Lights. In 1999, at the end of summer, Osborne, a lifelong Elvis fan, showed up in Memphis to help the owners of Graceland create a 2 million light holiday display themed to the music of Elvis, specifically the most famous holiday song by Elvis, Blue Christmas. Osborne suggested 40-foot walls of blue lights, inscribed with peace on earth in gold bulbs, some Christmas trees made of blue lights, and angels wearing gowns of blue lights. As a centerpiece, a 100-foot-tall tree made, of course, of blue lights with a 12-foot Elvis atop it. And probably one of the greatest nights of my life was when my limousine pulled up to Graceland. Osborne said. The gates automatically open. I go up to Graceland. Lisa Marie and Priscilla open the door and greet me, and we had dinner. And in Orlando, during these years, the display at Disney World continued to grow. For a while, in the late 1990s, the park offered guests disposable diffusion glasses that made the lights appear to glow. In 2004, construction crews demoed buildings on Residential Street to make way for a stage that would hold the Lights Motor Action Driving Show. But the Osborne lights were moved, expanded, and displayed on New York Street and the newly opened San Francisco skyline area. The overall section of the backlot would soon be called Streets of America, which would be home to the light display for many years. In 2004, it took, quote, a crew of 18 electricians, 14 weeks to hang 14 miles worth of stringed lights and nearly 7 miles of rope lights, all requiring 13,000 watts of power. This was also the year, we're taking a page from Osborne's old Arkansas display, Disney began to give each building in the backlot a different decoration theme. The following year, as part of a larger deal with Siemens for sponsorships in the parks, their Sylvania Lighting Division took over sponsorship of the Osborne family Spectacle of Lights. In 2006, the show added over 1,000 dimmer relay circuits and control switches to choreograph light movement with a high-energy selection of holiday music, mostly by Trans-Siberian Orchestra. The show producer that year, John Phelan, said, "The lights will literally dance this year. Periodically during the evening, the lights will dance for about 3 minutes throughout the entire Streets of America." By this point, the show no longer needed 18 full-time technicians to prep, repair, and stage the display. It now needed 30, whose job it was, starting in August, to arrange a display that wouldn't premiere until the end of November. The show now drew 800,000 watts of electricity. During the 6 weeks that the display was open, roughly 1 million visitors would explore the lights in the Disney backlot. Not long after that, Osborne began to experience health problems, a heart ailment that would eventually lead to surgery. But during this period, he continued to treasure his connection with the resort. "You know, a little factoid probably no one knows about," he said. "There's only 2 people with their names on merchandise at Disney for sale. Is Walt Disney and the Osborne family. We don't get a dime out of it, but the only 2 people with their names at Disney. When we go down for Christmas to see the lights every year, I bring my whole family down." Another time, when reflecting on the lights, he said, "That's been a big deal for us at Disney, just to know our lights are there, and they're seen by millions of people, and they have all the room in the world." His health continued to decline. In July 2011, he passed away following heart surgery, but the light spectacle continued at Disney World. By then, it was one of the largest and most complex nighttime shows at the resort. In 2012, a production team designed new show additions, and a technical team, now led by Jonathan Broom, helped develop, install, and document them. "The other crew chiefs don't even start on the show," Broom said, "until I've already been working on it for about 2 months. By midsummer, 8 lead technicians began to prepare the display, checking each strand, replacing bulbs, often swapping out old electrical lines for new ones. John Phelan, still the show director for the Osborne display, estimated that between 50 and 60% of the lights were replaced each year. In other words, around 2.5 million bulbs. By this time, many of the original Osborne materials had been replaced with similar items, as many old lines had deteriorated from the elements. The show now held over 5 million lights. The show also had some original music for part of its soundtrack, written by Dan Stamper at Disney, in which he arranged versions of songs such as Winter Wonderland to join existing songs such as Feliz Navidad by Jose Feliciano and the feverishly syncopated version of Jingle Bells by Barbra Streisand. The new songs were arranged specifically to choreograph the light displays, allowing displays to build with motion and brightness. I added layers of sound, Stamper said, that could be interpreted by the lights and build the energy. Each year, crowds pressed into the studios to see the lights. For some, a visit to the lights was a family tradition, one that started when the kids were small and now continued into their college years. In 2015, Disney, a few years after acquiring Lucasfilm, decided to remove the remaining backlot areas to create a permanent Star Wars land, later called Galaxy's Edge, and also so the Studios Park would function more like a traditional theme park, with a circular perimeter walkway similar to the layout for Animal Kingdom. Under the new identity of the Studios Park, a backlot area, mostly for the winter lights, was simply impractical to maintain. The announcement was made in September. My family and I are more than grateful for the opportunity and experiences that Disney World has given us, Osborne's daughter Breezy said, now taking the role of family spokesperson once occupied by her father. The final night for the lights was scheduled for January 3rd, a night with a modest chance of rain. But with high crowds and emotional appeals from fans, on the afternoon of January 3rd, Disney announced that it would extend the lights for 3 more days, with the final spectacle arranged for a night with clear though cold skies. On the final night, guests were packed elbow to elbow with toddlers sitting atop their parents' shoulders. Initially, Disney announced that the lights would switch off at 9 p.m., an hour before park closing. But they left the lights on for another hour. Along with the usual Christmas songs and millions of lights moving in time with music, a recorded announcement was played to close the evening. And now, as this holiday season draws to a close, we want to thank the Osborne family for sharing their beautiful light display with a song. The system then transitioned into the 1955 version of the Mickey Mouse Club March with the original Mouseketeers. Guests, more than a few of whom were tearful, joined in to sing, M.I.C. See you real soon. Then, briefly, the backlot went dark before rising again so guests could exit. The goal was to sweep the area in an hour, though it took far longer than that. In its final year, the Osborne lights were presented for 2 months, from November 6th to January 6th, an event that expanded far beyond the typical period for the winter holidays and far beyond anything that Jennings Osborne could have imagined when he put up those first strings of red lights many years ago. Unlike films, which typically are frozen in time, theme parks change from year to year. They are forever, if slowly, changing, with new wonders replacing old ones. I was told by those who work with decorations that some of the pieces in the light display were given back to the family, as even after 2 decades, some elements of the show, despite being repaired and upgraded, still had strong ties to the Osbornes. But many of the lights, particularly with the wiring, had deteriorated over time. Instead of the lovely flickering of a residential light display, the Studios Park now focuses on holiday projection shows at both Grauman's and on Sunset Boulevard. But every winter, I still see guests wearing shirts, pins, and hats tied to the Osborne lights. Small, personal reminders of what is no longer there. Here's hoping the holidays are treating you well. Until next time, this is Todd James Pierce.